WSMV, Nashville. From Channel 4 News, this is The Scene at 6 with Dan Miller, Demetria, Kalodimos, Bill Hall.
You're about to hear the voice of a 25-year-old news anchor, solo on the desk, handling one of the most chaotic news days in the history of the Tennessee prison system.
Good evening. In the last 24 hours, parts of 4 Tennessee prisons were wrecked because of rioting. Rioting sparked at one prison, igniting at 3 others. And one common reason for the uprisings was yesterday's deadline on all inmates wearing new uniforms with stripes down the side of the leg. The first upheaval was at Turney Center in Albany.
Yes, that's me. On a night I'll never forget. July 2nd, 1985.
Officials said it all began with about 15 or 20 inmates and then spread until about 350 were involved.
A few months ago, I moderated a town hall meeting on corrections, and one of the experts was the man in charge that July day 40 years ago. Former Correction Commissioner Steve Norris is about as calm and cool a character as you'd ever want to meet. Precisely the temperament we needed then and could probably use now. I asked him to come on down to our Banner studio to talk about the '85 riots, lessons learned, and lessons that in some ways have been ignored.
We basically concluded that the best thing we could do is be completely transparent about what was going on. And at the end of the day, that's the easiest thing to do.
And it's the most effective thing, isn't it?
I think so.
One inmate was killed in Morgan County tonight. A fire is burning at the Work Release Center, we are told, in Nashville, and the prison violence is apparently continuing. That's a Scene at 10. Thank you for watching, and good night.
I'm Demetria Kalodimos. It's Banner and Company. Well, Commissioner, good to see you after all these years.
Good to see you as well.
You know, this summer marked 40 years.
Right.
Since July 2nd, 1985.
Right.
You were the man in charge.
Correct.
You remember that day?
I remember it. Yeah, very well. Some things are sort of etched in your memory, and that's sort of one of them.
Yeah, me too. I think I told you I was the young kid on duty that day for arguably one of the biggest news stories that had ever come around.
Right. I think you told me Dan Miller had taken a vacation or gone out of town, and you
Darn
were
him.
Well, it was a busy day.
Yeah. How long had you been commissioner at the time?
About 3 months.
Really? Mm-hmm. You were that new? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I was appointed, it was either late March or early April in 85.
And there had been like a flurry of resignations or firings ahead of you, right?
Correct.
And what were your marching orders from Governor Alexander?
Well, the governor had been through 3 correction commissioners. And his explanation to me when he offered me the job was, I think I need a manager. And that was theoretically my skill set. So just get it in order. The system was in bad shape. It had suffered problem after problem after problem. We were under a federal court order. We had lost a major federal lawsuit called the Grubbs case. And we hit, major.
That was death row unconstitutional, correct? Or
the
more
entire
than that?
system.
The entire system,
Not just death row, the entire system. And we were under the direction of the federal court. There was a consent decree. We had a special master that worked for the federal judge, Judge Higgins. We had a series of consultants that had been employed by the federal court to take a look at the prison system and make recommendations as to what we could do to fix it.
Why'd you take that job? Boy,
I'm not sure. Some days I wonder. Governor asked, I thought the world of Governor Alexander, still do. He asked me to do it, and I agreed to do it.
When you came in, did they tell you, listen, this is a powder keg and it's fixing to blow, or?
I already knew it. I knew the system was in bad shape. I was in state government, had been in state government for 11 years and was the deputy commissioner in another department. But at that time, the system was in the newspaper and on the evening news daily.
Yeah.
And so it was not hard to figure out that the system was in bad shape and that needed a lot of work.
Overcrowding had existed since day one. I did some research. The old main prison was finished February 1898.
Right.
The day it opened, there were 800 cells and 1,400 people locked in.
Right.
Because how do you deal with a problem that is institutionally that way for a century?
Well, it's enormously difficult. I said often back then, and I still believe it, if you overcrowd a prison system, it's not a question of what's going to happen, it's just a question of when. And so each prison has what's called a rated capacity. There are X numbers of beds in that prison, and once you begin to put more people in that prison than it was designed to accommodate, then everything else begins to break down: food service, mail service, visitation. You begin to ignore policy and procedure, and you start cutting corners, and things snowball, and sooner or later it's gonna pop.
What was told to us was that uniforms were the catalyst.
They were the excuse. I don't know that they were the catalyst. It was building. You could almost feel it when you'd go through a prison. And at that time, I was on a pretty steep learning curve, and so I was trying to figure out I was trying to learn as much as I could, as fast as I could. But you could feel the tension, and the uniforms were the excuse. Mm-hmm. That's what started. The legislature passed a statute that required all inmates to go away from street clothes to, these denim blue jeans and blue shirts that had a white stripe down the side. And the inmates, of course, didn't like that, and that's what the excuse was.
Yeah, to be clear, the stripe was not the horizontal black and white.
No, it was.
Brother, where art thou?
No, it was a single stripe.
The Levi kind of pants that they still wear.
Right. Yeah, the uniform is basically still the same as it was then. And it was interesting, after we got on the other side of that disturbance, it never came up again.
Right.
It was never an issue after that.
What happened first that day?
Attorney Center. I remember it pretty well. My daughter at that time was about 12 years old, and we were having dinner together at a little restaurant off Harding Place. And believe it or not, back then we didn't have cell phones.
Right.
I know it's hard to imagine these days, but I didn't have a cell phone. But I had a pager, and my pager went off, and I called the number, and I don't remember who I was talking to, but they said, "Commissioner, we have a pretty serious disturbance at Attorney Center." So I gathered up my daughter, and off I went to the Tennessee Emergency Management Center, which is where I was supposed to go, and I had to arrange to get my daughter picked up, and that's where I was for the remainder of that night and all the next day.
They had taken hostages, hadn't they?
Not at Attorney Center. We didn't. The only place we had hostages was at the Old Main Prison, and that didn't occur until the day after. This was late. Attorney Center happened late in the day. And by dark, we had it reasonably secure, had secured the perimeter. We didn't have the interior secure yet. And the Old Main Prison didn't erupt until the following morning, about 7 o'clock.
How do you think word got out? As you said, we didn't have cell phones, but,
Television.
Really?
Sure.
You're going to blame us for that?
No, I'm not blaming anybody. But television, telephone calls, word just gets out.
Yeah.
And the excuse, or what you heard from the inmate population is, well, the guys at Attorney Centers were doing it, so we thought we'd do it too. It ended up erupting in 4 different prisons.
Yeah, like dominoes, they started falling.
Right.
There's a huge difference, though. Your administration, at least in my recollection, was very open with the media, especially that initial day and the following day. I mean, there were regular press conferences and constant updates. At one point, cameras came inside.
Right. I had a great mentor, John Parrish. I'm sure you remember him.
I do.
John and I talked early on when this was going on, and we basically concluded that the best thing we could do is be completely transparent about what was going on. And at the end of the day, that's the easiest thing to do.
And it's the most effective thing, isn't it?
I think so. I think so. We tried to be that way throughout my tenure as Commissioner of Correction. I wanted to be very transparent, very honest with people, so that there were no mysteries. It's much easier to do it that way. And so you're right. We had a number of press conferences that day.
It was very controversial, though, that in the end, when we did sort of the day after, weeks after analysis of that, some were critical of the media as possibly being used as a pawn. That we came in, our cameras were offered up to the inmates who
Right.
gave a live press conference, not delayed, live. That
Right.
was dangerous.
Right. The word came to me that that's what the inmates were asking for, and I thought about it. Mm-hmm. And I thought about turning it down, but ultimately concluded that it was in everybody's best interest that the media be allowed in, and everybody could see what we were dealing with. One interesting story with that regard, just before the press conference started, one of the editors at the Tennessean called me while I was at Tennessee Emergency Management, and I said, "Sandra, I'm really kind of busy right now." And she said, "There are no print media in the group of press that's going in, and I want you to get Jim O'Hara in there." And I said, "Sandra, I'll do it if I can." And so I picked up the phone and I called out there and got a hold of one of the assistant commissioners who was out there, Randy Griggs was his name. And I said, "Randy, find Jim O'Hara and get him in that press conference." And he did. And the next day, the Tennessean wrote a nice editorial about me. So I guess it worked out.
It did. In fact, I went back and looked at some of the old video, which I'm going to share with you, too. John Sigenthal, for us anyway. Channel 4 turned out to be the pool camera. It was one camera.
Really?
And it was John Siegenthaler and the late Walter Lowe with his camera. And the inmates were just, I believe they were on for like a half an hour.
Yeah, it lasted quite a while. But like I said, at the end of the day, I think it was the best thing. Still think it was the best thing to do.
Yeah. At the time, you were concerned that lives were at risk too. I mean, they said they were going to kill these guys they were holding hostage.
We had 5 correctional officers that were hostage, and I was very concerned about that. And there was a good deal of discussion among my deputy commissioner and a number of people that I had with me at Tennessee Emergency Management. And I remember somebody saying, "Commissioner, you can't let it get dark before we got those guys out." And I said, "Okay." And we assembled a tactical squad, TAC team. And 30 minutes before we were going to send them in, they let the hostages go. It was that close. But I knew if we had to storm that place, somebody was going to get hurt. Yeah. And it turned out we didn't have to.
Do you recall what the demands were?
No, I do not. I don't. Throughout the entire 2 days that we were dealing with this, I don't recall specific demands that the inmates were making. I don't think it was ever that organized. They were just allegedly mad about the uniforms and mad about being crowded. They're mad about the food service, but I don't remember any specific demands.
It's so crowded that when you go down to eat, you have to stand up and wait in line to get a table to sit down 4 and 5 and 10 minutes. The food, I wouldn't slop hogs with it.
It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kalodimos. We'll be right back.
At about the time Turney calmed down, another uprising began at the main prison in Nashville. Inmates there began setting fires, destroying property, and took 9 guards hostage. About 500 inmates took control of about 4 cell blocks, and correction officials said they had a full-scale riot on their hands for a while. Emergency vehicles and officers in riot gear quickly arrived and surrounded the institution. A standoff between guards and inmates remained until about 1:30, when officials agreed to let the news media conduct a live press conference with the inmates in exchange for the hostages' release.
Did you have to meet one-on-one with any of them, or was it all kind of played out through negotiation in the media?
With the
Inmates.
No, I did not. I never left TEMA during that whole ordeal.
No one was killed,
No.
correct?
No, that's not true. We lost one inmate in Morgan County.
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah, late at night, I think that...
We think that it was probably a revenge killing of some sort. He was assaulted by another inmate using a baseball bat. And so that's the only loss of life in that whole 36-hour ordeal.
So it ended in a mostly positive way, but the problem certainly didn't end.
No, the problems didn't end, and when at the end of the second day, when we essentially had reestablished control in each of the institutions that were experiencing the riots, that wasn't the end of it. And one of the things that's not widely known is that the day after, which I think was a Saturday, no, the day after I flew down to Attorney Center to inspect the damage. The day after that, I think, was a Saturday, and I was sort of recovering because I hadn't had much sleep. and my pager went off, and it was the warden at the Old Main Prison, Mike Dutton. And Mike said, "Commissioner, you need to come out here." And I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Well, I've got a bunch of really upset correctional officers. They're getting ready to walk off the job."
Wow.
So I jumped in the car and I went out to the Old Main Prison, and we sat down with the correctional officers, and we worked through each of their concerns. And some of the officers that were present had been held hostages, and so they were understandably upset. Who can blame them?
Right.
So we worked through, took most of the day, worked through the issues that they were concerned about. And we essentially, on the spot, changed the internal operations of the Old Main Prison. And the most dramatic change was where we had a lot of uncontrolled movement. Inmates would leave their cells and go to their job, for example, just
On their own,
or go to chow on their own. And we went to a system of controlled movement where groups of inmates were escorted by correctional officers to where they were going. And we reestablished control, and we ended up changing the daily schedule. I think we went to 10-hour days, which was a pretty expensive solution because of the overtime involved. But given what was at stake, I felt free to make that decision, and we did we made similar changes in each of the other prisons. So basically, once we were through the disturbances, we had better control over the inside of those prisons than we had before. And it was actually sort of a turning point.
I remember that main yard at the main prison was just constant movement. People could kind of come and go as they pleased, really.
Right, and we changed that, and it worked.
Did that come from your time in the military, that idea?
I can't say that it did. Of course, I don't recall how the idea came up, but it grew out of those discussions with the warden, his key personnel, and the correctional officers.
Did you end your tenure as commissioner when the court order was lifted, or did you see the end of that?
We could
chapter?
see the end of it. The court order was actually lifted after I left. Mm-hmm. But
the progress had been made.
We made a ton of progress. Those last 2 years, the first year nearly killed me. The second year was a little bit better. The third year was much better. As a matter of fact, I got married in the third year of that, and we were able to take a honeymoon and didn't get any phone calls. And so
Pager didn't go off.
no. And fourth year was pretty calm. So we had the system pretty stable. We were headed in very specific directions. We had figured out what we needed to do relative to the court orders, the improvements we needed to make. As you recall, in late 1985, there was a special session of the legislature, and we were able to get raises for the correctional officers and a lot of the counselors and so forth, the folks who worked in the prisons. We were able to get appropriations for 2 new prisons, River Bend and West Tennessee High Security Prison, that are now in operation. And so when I left, things were much, much better. And Judge Higgins was, when he issued his final order that took the state out, was kind enough to mention that. So,
Let's talk a little bit about privatization.
okay.
CCA at the time of the riots in '85, this is hard to believe, was just 1 year into an experiment at South Central. They were going to do one proof of concept kind of prison. What did you think at the time of prisons as a profit-making venture?
Well, it actually started, the notion of privatization actually started pretty early in my tenure when CCA offered to buy the state prison system. And I was pretty surprised about that. And although, as I thought about it, philosophically, it didn't cause me much discomfort, but I kind of wondered how they were going to do that. How do you value a state prison system? What do you do with the correctional officers? What do you do with the staff? And so all these questions kept coming up. As I recall the legislation, CCA was going to be allowed to operate one prison. We were, at that time, we were desperately looking for solutions that we could rely on. And so I viewed that, I viewed privatization as part of the solution to the overall problem, because part of our problem was still overcrowding. Yeah. But based on Judge Higgins' court order, we couldn't take an inmate. Late '85, I think, he shut down intake.
Right. Said, you had to release someone before you could take someone in.
That's exactly right.
And people were not pleased about that idea.
No, the sheriffs were sort of up in arms about it, and I don't blame them, because that meant that inmates were backing up in the local jails.
Here we are 40 years later. What do you think about private prisons? You and I just were at a forum where we heard from families who are just beside themselves.
Right. Well, obviously, it needs to be fixed. Obviously, there's something terribly, terribly wrong, or was, at that prison. As I understand it, and I don't have any direct knowledge of this, the company has begun taking some steps to try to gain control. Whether that's going to work or not, I don't know. But I think you heard me say when you and I were together last that my recommendation would be to draw the inmate population down to the bare minimum, rehire, retrain, revet every single employee in there. Search that prison from one end to the other, because there's got to be contraband in there, and reopen it very, very slowly, and let your correctional officers gain experience. That prison in Trousdale County started very badly, and I think I understand why. Is you had brand new green correctional officers and staff, and you had very experienced, in some cases, career problematic inmates that the warden said, hey, take this guy. Wardens are great at doing that to each other. I mean, they are, and so the system dumped a lot of experienced inmates into a system where you had a lot of really inexperienced correctional officers, and got out of control, and they hadn't been able to regain control. It started badly and it stayed bad.
Yeah, and it was supposed to be, I think, medium security, and there were max guys in there for sure.
That I don't know, but yeah. That's probably true, folks. I mean, it's
classification is hard, though.
It is. It's At the time I was there, we had 3 classification centers, and we made a lot of improvements in the classification system. But what you end up with is the temptation to begin to mess around with that classification system to meet the bed space that you've got. You've got more low security beds than you have medium and high security. And so the temptation is to mess with the classification system so that you can fill those beds. And it was a temptation when I was there, and I even thought about doing it a couple of times. And I'm sure it's still a temptation.
Yeah. Were you worried that the private prisons were going to steal your best people in terms of staff?
No, I don't recall being worried about that.
But that ain't an easy job. It's hard to retain people.
It is. Being a correctional officer is tough work. And at that time, we really didn't pay very well. We improved the salary structure while I was there pretty substantially. And I think since that time, the state has taken some considerable steps to improve the salaries of correctional officers in the system today. But it's a tough job, no matter what you get paid. It can be dangerous, and the pressures are immense. You're making, if you're a correctional officer, you're making pretty hard decisions on a day-to-day basis. And so, it's a tough job.
You said that you were hired because you were a manager. Had you been inside of a lockup before?
No.
Really?
Never been in a prison. As I look back on it, I kind of wonder why I did it too. No, I had never been in a prison.
But were you approaching it as just a, here's the problem and here's steps to fix it, regardless of what the nature of the problem was?
Yeah, problems like that are incremental, and they're related. If you twist this knob over here moves. And so you had to think of it in terms of being a system, not a bunch of individual prisons. Each prison had a mission, and each mission was for example, you had classification centers, you had high security prisons, you had low security prisons. So every prison had a mission, and so it was a collection of 16 prisons that made up a system. And what we had to do was begin to identify the most compelling problems, put those problems in priority order, and just began to grind away at it. We knew we weren't going to fix it overnight. It's not possible to turn the Queen Mary around on a dime. Mm-hmm. And so we just had to start picking away at those problems. And one of the problems we had was our own credibility. We weren't credible with anybody. We weren't credible with the media. We weren't credible with the legislature, which you absolutely have to be. We weren't credible, certainly, with the citizenry, which deserved to have a safe and secure system. And so we had to begin to work on that. The correction department has a whole bunch of different audiences. I mean, again, the media, the legislature, the families, lawyers, federal courts, and so if you think of it in terms of the correction system being in the middle, there's lots of constituencies out there, and so you had to figure out how to deal with each of those constituencies and be credible about it. And part of that was part of that went into the decision of being as transparent as we could.
I'm having another moment of PTSD. The escapes. Mm-hmm. Remember those?
Oh yeah.
Of course you do.
We had several when I was there. We were able to by improving policy and procedure, we were able to put a stop to a lot of it. But for example, I remember at Morgan County, the inmates found a blind spot in the fence where they weren't visible from any of the correctional officers' towers. And they were able to cut through that fence and escape. And there were several of them. I can't remember how many, but it was like 6 or 7 of them. And they got out. Fortunately, in Morgan County, there's no place to go. So they got up into the mountains, and of course we had the ability to track them, and it was cold. And I'm not sure whether we captured them or rescued them, but we were able to find them, I think, the following day.
One thing you did not have to deal with was an execution.
I did not. I was within 3 days one time.
Ron Harris?
I don't remember which inmate it was, but there's a protocol. I'm not sure what it looks like today, but back then the protocol required that 5 days prior to an execution, you moved the inmate off the death row into another unit. And we had already taken that step when I received a court order that stayed the execution.
Are you relieved that you didn't have to walk that walk?
Yeah. I mean, I had, Governor Alexander and I had talked about that, and he said, "Are you willing to do that?" And I have to admit, I thought about it a bit and concluded that, yes, it was a legitimate court order. I could carry it out. But I'm just as happy I never had to. That's got to be difficult for anybody that's making that decision.
It's Banner and Company. And my guest is former Tennessee Correction Commissioner Steve Norris, who navigated a troubled system through some tumultuous years. We'll be right back. This has been quite a life for a kid that grew up in the grocery business.
My father and uncle were in the grocery business, yeah.
How come you didn't follow suit?
Well, I ended up going to school. I'm from Knoxville originally. Ended up going to school at MTSU. Terrible student. Then I went in the Air Force for 4 years and came back and was an excellent student.
That'll do it.
It did. And 2.5 years overseas. And so when I got out of school, I got a job in downtown Nashville and stayed.
You enjoyed working with the legislature?
Yes, I did.
Did they ever
actually
try to get you to run for something?
No, I never had a desire to run for anything. But yeah, I liked it. But you know, it was a bit different back then when I was Commissioner of Correction. It was much more collegial. Today, the legislature is very polarized. Back then, it wasn't. As you will remember, we had a Republican. I was working for a Republican governor for the first 2 years. I worked also 2 years for Governor McWhorter. And the legislature was by a large majority Democrat.
Yep.
And so, but there was a working relationship between the administration and the legislature. There were those natural strains that you have. I mean, under any circumstances, there's sort of a bit of an antagonistic relationship between the legislature and the governor, whether or not the same party. And there was a bit of an antagonistic relationship between the Democrat legislature and Republican governor. But there was enough goodwill among the legislative leadership and the administration that we were able to work together. One of the guys that is a friend of mine today and was in legislative leadership was Bob Rochelle, who's a Democrat senator. Was an excellent senator from Lebanon, and he and I actually got to be fairly good friends throughout that whole process.
Do you see an end to that? Do you see a turnaround?
In today's world, no. I wish there would be. It's much more polarized. I'm not sure what the solution is there, but I'd like very much for the relationship between and among legislators and between the administration and the legislature be much more collegial, like it used to be. Maybe I'm just old and sentimental, but I'd like for it to be that way again.
Well, you're a great manager.
I don't know whether I am or not, but we were. I had a bunch of really great people working with me in that department, and was able. One of the things I asked for when I was appointed is I said, I've got 5 guys in mind I want to bring with me, and I actually ended up getting 4 of them. One guy had actually moved to Pennsylvania, and his name was George Little. He ultimately ended up during the Sunquist administration being Commissioner of Correction. No, Bredesen administration. He actually came back to work with us at the department. So, a bunch of really great people.
There is no longer the ability for someone with a news camera to go inside TDOC facility or a core civic facility. I've never seen the inside of a core civic facility.
Why not? They
Policy.
Won't let you?
They will not let us, in some cases, not even into the parking lot. Is that a problem in your eyes?
Yes. I think transparency is the best alternative. Removes the mystery. You know, if you've got something wrong, admit it. Deal with it. Don't try to hide it. That just creates more distrust.
If they called you up today and said, Commissioner, we need some help over here, could they lure you out of your pheasant hunting retirement to help?
After I got back.
Would you be willing, though, to
Sure.
take a look at it?
Sure. I mean, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I'm 80 years old, but I'm in relatively decent shape. And I still have a concern. I've worked for the state of Tennessee for 26 years off and on, and I loved it. And I worked with and for some really, really great people. And so it's a good memory for me. And if there was anything I could do to help, I'd certainly be willing to do it.
All right. Maybe someone's listening.
Well, I hope somebody is.
Me too.
Sure.
Banner and Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. This episode is produced by Steve Haruch and edited by me. The original music is by Verlin Thompson. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. Well, our last question is in the fishbowl. You get to choose one and answer it. It came from someone that was a previous guest. I can't tell you who. It'll be written on there.
From Bob Bernstein. Who is your
favorite teacher and why?
Lady named Miss Dupree at Central High School in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was an English teacher and one of the kindest people. I wasn't a really great student, but she was one of the kindest people and one of the most encouraging people that I ever met. It was high school English, you know. So I think I was a sophomore or junior. I don't think I'll ever forget her. She was absolutely terrific. Don't remember her first name, but her last name was Dupree.